Now, the British state seems to find enemies under the sofa every single day. They are constantly carping on about the idea that there is some kind of subversive force at play that's trying to undermine their society, rather than anything being down to their failed economic and social model that they've built over the last 45 years. And this has culminated in this hilarious development from today, which is that Jonathan Hall Casey, the independent reviewer of the state threat legislation, is going to do a report about anti-subversion laws being necessary to save democracy, essentially, right? Now, I'm not saying that state interference doesn't happen. I think it absolutely does, and all sides do it. What is important about this article, and what's funny about this article, is the examples that they give on what they believe as being state interference. Anyway, let's have a read. Mr. Hall was asked by Home Secretary Yvette Cooper to review whether there were elements of counter-terrorism legislation which could be emulated to address state-based security threats last December. In particular, he was asked to look at what legal measures would be useful against highly aggressive state bodies such as Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The idea that the IRGC are doing anything in the UK or care about what the UK says or does is quite frankly for the birds, but whatever. I'm sure they're going to try and find out how all of these young people who think that genocide is bad, for example, are all suddenly Iranian operatives, you know? Anyway, in a speech to the Policy Exchange think tank on Monday, Mr. Hall will say the internet offers intelligent officers a perfect way of directly recruiting, tasking, and paying individuals. Right. So, at least they're opening up off the bat that this is coming directly from Policy Exchange, a pretty hard right think tank that is certainly involved in a lot of imperial propaganda. Like, they literally do interference themselves to propagandize people. So no wonder they get people on their side accusing others of doing the same, but whatever. They are certainly ideologically captured and are specifically, as all think tanks are, they're explicitly created for the purpose of the dissemination of propaganda. So to try and go after other people for doing propaganda is very funny, even if it might be true and there is a propaganda that's being pushed by foreign states. The fact that Policy Exchange do internal propaganda is very funny to me. It's the Spider-Man's pointing meme, really, isn't it? Young people who might once have been attracted to a terrorist cause are now willing to carry out sabotage for Putin's Russia, he will add in the John Crean Memorial Lecture. They are recruited in exactly the same way, by groups operating on Telegram, an encrypted messaging app, the reviewer says. I am thinking about the measures that may one day be needed to save democracy from itself. What do I mean? I am referring to counter-subversion, he is set to add. Counter-subversion was part of MI5's role in the 1950s and 1970s, but fell out of favour, associated with McCarthyism and infiltrations of domestic protest groups by undercover police, Mr. Hall says. Yeah, because it was found out that counter-subversion wasn't actually undermining state-influenced subversive groups. It was just being used to silence the free speech and free assembly of people who had genuine and sincerely held views outside the political mainstream, such as being left-wing or a socialist, or a communist, for example. This has nothing to do with foreign subversion, right? All of these conspiracy theories about the Soviet Union paying communist groups in the UK. We literally had our own form of anti-Soviet communism in Europe and in the UK more broadly called Eurocommunism, right? Like, Eurocommunism was explicitly a thing that existed within Europe as a reaction to the kind of authoritarianism that you got from Soviet communism. So they were obsessed with this idea of there being, like, Soviet spies in the UK. Like, Jeremy Corbyn, the supposed Czechoslovak spy, and it was just sincerely held beliefs of left-wing people that were being ostracized from society on the grounds of holding those beliefs in the first place and getting spied on by the security services. Actual literal spy cops bullshit, which continued to this day, with the spy cop scandal infiltrating environmentalist movements as well. New laws may now be needed, but they would need to come with legal safeguards. If I was a foreign intelligence officer, of course I would ensure that the UK hated itself and its history, he says in the speech. I mean, we don't hate ourselves and our history, we just don't have rose-tinted spectacles about what that represents, right? We view British history warts and all. We think that empire is bad, and the British Empire did lots of bad things because it did. We're not here trying to sugarcoat the history of the British Empire or of political leaders like, for example, Winston Churchill, who did plenty of good things, who was one of the many figures who helped defeat fascism in Second World War, but who's also responsible for many terrible things, you know? In the same way that, for example, I don't know, Joseph Stalin helped defeat the Nazis, did a lot of really bad stuff as well, you know? Just because you did one good thing, it doesn't give you a free pass on all the bad things that you did, you know? Anyway, this is the funny bit, right? This is the funny bit. That the very definition of woman could be put into question, and that masculinity could be presented as toxic, and that white people should be ashamed and non-white people aggrieved, and I would promote anti-Semitism within politics. So let's get this straight, chat. Let's get this straight. This guy is trying to claim that trans people existing in society, and that trying to foment some kind of racial equality, for example, or gender equality, is a Russian plot. I don't know when Vladislav Surkov made me a sleeper agent for the transes. I don't know when somebody from the Russian propaganda department told me that I should take hormone replacement therapy and change my name. Maybe it's something to do with my own internal personality or my own internal brain chemistry that might have done that. Potentially. No, but I'm sure at some point over the past 33 years, a Russian agent has rewired my brain to make me transgender. Sounds an awful lot like cultural Bolshevism. It does sound a lot like cultural Bolshevism, doesn't it? It does explicitly sound like the theory that external Marxist forces are trying to undermine the West, which is the basis of the cultural Bolshevik conspiracy theory that underpin Nazi ideology. And again, by promoting anti-Semitism within politics, what he's saying is opposing Israel's genocide. That's what that's a dog whistle for. My intention would be to cause both immediate and long-term damage to the national security of the UK by exploiting the freedom and openness of the UK by providing funds, exploiting social media and entryism. Pro-Russia groups find ideological affinity with lone actors by posing as protectors of Christian civilization and by positioning Russia as a true defender of crumbling Western civilization, he says. That is the tell, right? That's the tell. Where he is so in hoc, essentially, to anti-progressive ideas, that he is trying to say, but I support all the same things that Vladimir Putin supports. I'm a good person. I can't be doing that. It must be that everyone disagreeing with me and me agreeing with Russia is Russian propaganda to try and get me to support them, rather than the fact that you're just progressive. It's such motivated reasoning that the only reason everyone disagrees with me is because of Russian disinformation to try and get people like me to support Russia, rather than just the fact that people disagree with you because you're wrong, or that you just have different values to everybody else. Very, very strange and telling that he could try and claim that the rise of people who want social justice, for example, broadly, because that's what it's attacking. By attacking the trans community, attacking people who support Palestine, and by attacking people who want racial justice, right? What he's attacking here is broad social justice causes, and saying that they're a Russian plot to get people who are anti-social justice to support Russia because they are traditional in comparison. They are regressive in comparison. And because he is a regressive, he thinks that this is a plot to make him support Russia, rather than just him being completely out of touch. Foreign intelligence agents could already be using social media as a delightful playground for wedge issues. And this is actually true. This is the one part that is true. It's the other way around than what he's implying. It's not people supporting the rights of trans people that's a Russian plot. It's the other side that's being done. Right? The biggest scandal internationally that we've seen regarding trans people that's kind of breached all kind of cultural and national boundaries was the Imam Khalif scandal, which was literally pushed by a Russian institution, the IBA, where they spread a fake conspiracy theory about her being transgender, or even intersex when she is neither of those things, you know? Like, the single time where there's actually been a Russian disinformation campaign around trans people, it was the other way around. It was trying to get people mad about the idea that Imam Khalif was erroneously transgender or intersex when she fucking wasn't. Like there are many transgender Algerians, you know? Hardly easy to come out as transgender, let alone be a national sports person if you're transgender in Algeria. But this was literally Russian disinformation, and yet he's trying to say that it's people being pro-trans that are being part of a Russian disinformation campaign. They could seek to use online sextortion tactics to obtain compromat and force individuals to carry out tasking, while they may also be seeking to meddle in Brexit, Scottish independence, or the independence of overseas territories. Again, just have you considered at any point in any material analysis that maybe something like Scottish independence is based in this giant divide between the material fortunes of England and Scotland, and it's not just Russian disinformation? Things are different than when I was a child, therefore it must have been subverted by outside forces. Maybe just society changes, mate. People's values change. they might encourage extreme forms of environmentalism, or policies that would damage adversaries' economy, or at least sow discord or hopelessness, the reviewer adds. I mean, by extreme forms of environmentalism, do you mean not wanting climate collapse? Or like damage the economy? Oh well, praise be to the line. The line must go up, regardless of the environmental consequences, apparently, Mr. Hall. Content moderation, i.e. removing, blocking or limiting access to certain content, is never going to sufficiently address the unprecedented access that the internet accords to impressionable minds, Mr. Hall says. Legal measures that have proved useful in dealing with domestic terrorist groups may need to be adapted for groups that involved in state threats to stop them promoting themselves and inviting support online and offline, he says in the speech. One answer is the offence of foreign interference under the new National Security Act, but by proving that a foreign hand is at work can be very difficult, Mr. Hall says. Another answer is social resilience against disinformation, or even a Cold War mentality that sniffs out subversion. So essentially, trying to cancel people for wrongthink. You know he's going to come after the transes, like you know he's going to come after us. But what if it was necessary to go further? What if it was necessary to investigate intrusively the source of funding for protest movements? I mean, we're all open. The protest movements are open about our funding. What are you talking about? Mr. Hall asks if it might be necessary to bring forward a law in the interest of national security banning extremism or subversion. He asks if it might be desirable to pass a law banning Muslim Brotherhood candidates from standing in elections. So yeah, he is literally advocating for McCarthyism. Such laws would be difficult, he acknowledges, but because they would have to be based on general principles that apply to individuals equally, such as separatism, hateful extremism, or subversiveness, which have so far eluded politicians. But the problem with trying to define the concept of subversiveness is this idea that the established precedent is somehow the best one, right? This is what happens a lot of the time, is that people get convinced that how everything previously was is the way that it must be and must stay, that they view anyone who has a contrary ideology, a contrary position, a contrary belief system as being wrong prima facie, right? This is very similar in context and in tone to an article that Ayaan Hirsi Ali did for, I think, the Free Press. I believe that was the Free Press. Might have been a different publication, but either way, it was her article that she did, which was about an idea that somehow there was subversion happening across the West, and it was being done by a coalition of Marxists, Islamists, and the Chinese Communist Party, which is some hysterical conspiracy theory slop, right? And that somehow they all want to join together to destroy the West. And I'm like, no, we just have value systems that disagree with you. 3 separate value systems that are not all congruous with each other, but different from yours. And young people are unsatisfied with what they've been given from society. And so they are looking towards a different economic and social model than the one that you grew up with. People disagreeing with you is not entirely down to Russian disinformation campaign and the Chinese Communist Party. Russian hybrid warfare against the West has been massively successful. These podcasts alone prove it. There is things like the podcast network that funded like Tim Pool and that funded Dave Rubin, and that was done through that Canadian lady, I forget what her name is, right? I'm not saying these things don't happen, but trying to claim that all social justice movements are fucking astroturfed is crazy, because it's just not true. And also, the biggest irony of all of this, right, is that the implication from all of this is that somehow subversion is a uniquely Russian phenomenon. Now, Russia does do this all the time, right? But subversion was literally being done throughout the entirety of the post-war period by the United States and the United Kingdom to a lesser extent. The National Endowment for Democracy was explicitly a subversive entity being used to undermine American enemies. The National Endowment for Democracy literally funded fascist and nationalist parties in Yugoslavia to foment its breakup, which led to multiple genocides in Bosnia and in Kosovo, right? This was explicitly done by anti-communist and anti-socialist forces from the West through subversive funding of nationalist groups in places like Serbia and Croatia. There's a really great film called The Weight of Chains by Serbian filmmaker Boris Malagurski that goes into how these subversive powers specifically tried to break apart Yugoslavia by funding these dissident groups internally, because they opposed the fact that Yugoslavia was socialist rather than that it was a Yugoslav entity in of itself, and they had to do this by fomenting nationalism, which led to multiple genocides, right? Like, this is something the West has always done. And I'm like, sure, it's bad when they do it, and it's bad when Russia does it as well. But the argument against this isn't banning people who disagree with the status quo, which is essentially what is being advocated for by this McCarthyism from Jonathan Hall. I think it is also worth pointing out as well, to finish up this segment, that the KC had his appointment extended by the Labour government. This Jonathan Hall McCarthyist prick, right, was supposed to have his term finishing, but was reappointed by this current Labour government. This current Labour government are in bed with McCarthyites. So just like in the same way that the current Labour government extended the appointment of culture war plant Kishwa Faulkner at the EHRC, who is institutionally captured to be against the things the EHRC is supposed to stand for, because she was appointed to try and undermine trans rights deliberately by the Conservative Party, and her term was extended by the Labour government. The same is true of this guy. This McCarthyist, this explicit McCarthyist, was supposed to have his term finishing, but was extended by the Labour government. Know your enemies, chat. Know your enemies. Hey there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for membership to just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.